So let's start with a simple question. Do you think that love is predictable? If you're like me and you have been growing up watching rom-coms where, the female lead gets swooped up by Prince Charming, that handsome guy with so much money who, can even cook for you and has all these, I don't know, grand wealth, right? And we grew up hearing these stories especially as a girl, right, that one day our Prince Charming will come and save us and we will have that happy ever after. But is love always like this? In real life, things don't always look like that, and sometimes the excitement fades and relationships become a routine. Suddenly people aka me are asking, is something wrong or is this just what love eventually becomes? To further explore this, I took it to the ground to ask a few of our classmates the same question. Do you think that love is predictable?
For me, I would say love is not predictable.
Can't really predict like an emotion another person could be giving you. You never know when it's gonna come. It's very unexpected.
I believe in love at first sight. It has no correct formula.
Or you might be attracted to someone of your type. Falling in love with someone may not be predictable in the sense of you view that someone as a potential partner.
You can meet people from like a friend of a friend, you know.
I think that it's unpredictable, and that's a fun part about it as well.
Yeah, indeed. So a lot of them shared that love is actually unpredictable. There's no set formula. You never know when you're gonna meet someone, whether it's love at first sight or even maybe someone who doesn't even match your ideal type, right? There's all these unpredictable factors that comes with finding love. And that's actually what our studies also show. So to examine this even deeper, we looked at 3 studies that examine love from the different stages. The first study by Joel and colleagues asked whether we can predict who people will feel attracted to. Participants filled out a personality and preference survey, then took part in speed dating and rated their attraction after each interaction. The studies found that while it is possible to predict who is generally liked or tend to like others, it is not possible to predict the unique spark between two people before they meet. The authors conclude that attraction depends on real interaction and not just traits or compatibility. The second study by Sheets examined whether passionate love decreases over time. Using surveys of adults in relationships, the study measured passion and something called self-expansion, which refers to how much a relationship helps a person grow and experience new things. The results showed that passion does not simply fade with age. Instead, it depends on whether the relationship continues to feel exciting and allows for personal growth. The study concludes that passion can be maintained if relationships avoid becoming routine. The third study by Nito and colleague focused on companionate love, which is love based on care, support, and concern for a partner. Using a large survey of adults, they found that companionate love stays stable or even increases over time and is linked to well-being and relationship satisfaction. The authors conclude that long-term relationships rely more on care and commitment rather than on excitement. And to further supplement our research, we'll be interviewing 2 very interesting and important guests today to see what love really looks like beyond the initial spark and what it takes for it to actually last. And so, our first guest will be Dr. Virgil Sheets, a psychology professor from Indiana State University, whose research focuses on how couples maintain passion over time through growth and shared experience. Our second guest is Dr. Sandra Langeslag, an associate professor at the University of Missouri St. Louis, who studies how love works in the brain. And with that, let's extend our welcome to our 2 very esteemed guests.
Today, we're joined by Dr. Virgil Sheets from Indiana State University. His research challenges the common belief that passion fades with age. Drawing on self-expansion theory, he shows that passionate love can actually be maintained and even grow when relationships continue to offer novelty, growth, and new experiences. We're excited to explore what keeps passion alive over time and what this means for modern relationships. Once again, thank you, Dr. Virgil Sheets, for joining us. All right, starting with the first question. We often hear about the shift from passionate love to companionate love over time. From your perspective, how do we distinguish between passionate love and companionate love in long-term relationships?
Passionate love is the It's associated with arousal. It's the excitement of being with your partner and wanting to be with your partner. And companionate love, you want to be with your partner as well, but it's less excitement. It's more about the feeling of warmth and feeling of acceptance from your partner.
That's actually pretty common in this era. A lot of couples are this way as well. They actually start in a romantic, the passionate love stage. So in that case, do you think one is more important than the other?
No. I mean, uh, people vary, in their interaction style and preferences. I think you've got to have the companionate if you want to stay together and be happy, for a long time. But uh, which makes it seem like that might be better or more important. But but for lots of people, the passion is really important too because it draws you together to begin with, and it just makes it so much more enjoyable to have that component with it. I mean, you can have, I think, a satisfying long-term relationship without the passion. I I've known people who seem to have that, but I think the passion really adds to it and makes it just so much more pleasurable.
Thank you for sharing that. Now, Rachel will continue with the next question.
Your research actually suggests that passionate love doesn't always just fade away or decline, and in some cases, it can actually rebound in long-term relationships. We would like to ask you what are some factors that could contribute to this rebound in passionate love between couples?
So as you know from my paper, I worked with this self-expansion model, which is this idea that you experience the passion as you grow to know your partner, as you experience a sense of yourself increasing or expanding. And the reason we feel so much passion at the beginning of the relationship is there's so much we've got to learn, and we're constantly, every time we're talking to our partner, we're learning something new, and that's being incorporated into our sense of who we are and our capacities in interacting with the partner. And it often seems to decline over time because people get to know each other and they stop doing novel things. They just sort of, I don't want to say they get in a rut, but life stabilizes. But it doesn't have to go away, at least as my research suggests, if you can keep that sense of growth going, and you've got to have that opportunity to keep feeling like you're growing as a person. And you can do it by doing new things with your partner, because you're learning about your partner at that time. But I don't think it has to be. I don't think your partner has to be the source of the excitement and arousal. I think just being with your partner as you're going through that can do it.
Actually, speaking of sources and opportunity, something that we discussed in class was that maybe like changes in life stages or like your children leaving your home. Like, do you think these could have an influence in this self-expansion?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you first have kids, you can grow, with your partner through that, but then, life takes hold and you're taking care of them. But I think as they leave home, it gives the adults more opportunity to try new things, to get involved in new hobbies, and to grow together in ways that weren't possible when you're dealing with the day-to-day life. And in fact, in my study, we did see that about 20 years into the relationship, there was an increase in the love over time, and I attribute that in part to the kids probably leaving about that time. Uh, it's an empirical question. We didn't measure specifically when the kids left, or nowadays in the US, there's an awful lot of kids moving back home under various circumstances. So it would be interesting to see how that impacts that process, or if it does.
Very interesting points because from Singapore's perspective, as Singaporeans, sometimes the children, we still live with our parents until old age. And we would also like to know if it's not just our partners that can help us with self-expansion. There are maybe like lifetime events that could trigger it as well. And as we talk about these positive factors, what about something that has a negative connotation to it? Do you think conflict could actually play a positive role in rebounding this passionate love as well?
Conflict's tricky. I mean, I think it can, but it needs to be handled right. You know, if it's conflict that results in physical violence, that's certainly not going to. I don't think that's going to be good. But if you handle it and learn about the about your partner and yourself through that, and come out of it, you know, maybe. I think it would not be the preferred way by any means.
It does say a lot about relationship maintenance, that a couple really has to go through a lot of trials and really fully understand each other so that conflict can be seen as excitement rather than like the reason for the dissolution of a relationship.
Right. If it's a disagreement in perspectives where you can learn from seeing how your partner is seeing things differently, then I think it could be an exciting growth opportunity. But if it's conflict about doing household chores, I don't know that that's going to generate the same thing. And can I ask a question based on what you asked?
Sure, go ahead.
So you mentioned that in Singapore, lots of kids live with their parents until old age. Is that continuous, or is it moving out and then back in, or?
I would say in our context, some families they don't move out. So we have our family home, and let's say someone marries, they marry into their household. So they don't move out. But there are some that do move out as well. I think I think in terms of culture, and maybe because there's limited land capacity here in Singapore, so housing is actually quite difficult to secure. That's why children tend to live with their parents to a much older age than I would say in the US.
Okay. No, I find that interesting, and it does raise interesting questions about the cultural differences in the patterning of passionate love. On the one hand, you know, it could be that with new people moving into the household, that generates a lot of growth and excitement, and I mean that's interesting. So.
I think it's something that we were very interested in as we discussed it, because as we were discussing this with the class, we were also bringing up like the different kinds of romantic relationships that this study could apply to. Like, what if it was arranged marriages, or like uh, relationships that did not start off with passionate love?
Right, right. No, is it still common to have arranged marriages there?
Uh, Maybe not in Singapore particularly, but when we think of like Asian or like the Middle Eastern countries, I think arranged marriages are still quite common there.
And it is interesting how that works. I don't think, at least theoretically, the passion, you don't have to start the relationship off with the passionate love, right? Uh, but the process should still be the same, according to uh, the self-expansion model. As long as the growth in the self is occurring, that passion should occur as well. And I've been wanting actually to get a student interested in arranged marriages for a number of years, but haven't gotten anyone to take me up on that.
I'm sure that if you manage to have this opportunity, we would be excited to learn more about it as well. Actually, on the topic of how like passionate love may not be necessary at the start of relationship formation, uh, let's bring it to today's context, because your paper was written like 13 years ago, so there's
Yeah.
almost a decade of difference. But in today's digital age, People are constantly exposed to new experiences, new people, and endless possibilities through platforms like social media and dating apps. Do you think that this constant exposure to novelty encourages people, especially the younger generation, to seek new passionate experiences across multiple partners rather than developing deeper, more stable forms of love?
That's interesting. Just haven't seen evidence that modern relationships are getting more unstable, which would seem to be the prediction there, right? At least in the US, even in the digital age, the divorce rate has been fairly stable. People aren't just don't seem to be finding all these other routes of passion with other partners and breaking up. Uh, so I mean, I when I first heard that question, I was sort of on your viewing things along your lines, but I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like it's happening that way, and so I think there might be something else interfering.
I think that's actually a very valid thought because maybe along the lines of this question, we were thinking that there are research that says our attention span is getting shorter. And on dating apps, like let's say for example, on dating apps, people are just they look at appearance and just swipe immediately. How do you think this could That's why we thought along the lines that maybe passionate love is about chasing it with multiple partners.
The research, yet on the one hand, we may have a shorter attention span, but research shows we make decisions about people in milliseconds, right? So the fact that people on Tinder might focus on appearance only, I think we've been doing that even without Tinder, right? We see someone and we make a judgment very, very quickly about are they a potential friend or potential mate or just never going to be more than an acquaintance? And so uh, we're showing our lack of attention nowadays, but I don't know that we need any more time. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Interesting. I think it ties in with the fact that there's so many factors in why people want to start a relationship and how they would choose to pursue it. I think that it also ties in with how we are exposed to romantic relationships ourselves, like how it provides this kind of like schemata. And
Right. The work model, your parents.
given your work on self expansion and how passionate love changes over time, do you think that media portrayals of constant intensity creates unrealistic expectations about relationships, especially when passionate love declines without novelty?
Right. No, I do think the media uh, plays a role in setting expectations and uh, traditionally it was the mainstream media. You mentioned social media, and I think it can do that as well to the extent that we see only a curated, version of people's lives that emphasizes the the certain features.
But do you think that, like, let's say hypothetically, people might misinterpret this decline in passionate love as a sign that the relationship is failing?
Oh yeah, I do think some people do that. You know, they don't appreciate the fact that you've got another kind of love, and it's a real kind of love that's valuable, the companionate, uh, and they don't often understand how to keep the passion going. I mean, we always assume we should just do what we've always done, do what's made us happy in the past, and that generates some pleasure. But as you keep referring to, according to at least self-expansion theory, the novelty is an important component. And so what we need to do is do something different than what we've always done.
I would like to know if there are ways that rather than focusing on passionate love and needing novelty to keep this pleasure, can we also seek this kind of pleasure from companionate love itself?
Yeah, I mean, so I would not say that passion is the only source of pleasure. I might have implied that, I guess, early on when I was talking about, I think the passion adds a degree of pleasure, but it's a different kind of pleasure. I think the companionate is very important too, and very pleasurable, right? I with my students use the example, when I first got involved with my wife, it seemed like I had to talk all the time, right? We had to constantly have conversation, and now, we've been married 40 years, and so uh, it's nice to be able to get in the car and not feel that I've got to maintain, a constant conversation. Just that feeling of her being there, right next to me, is also a source of pleasure. It's a different kind of pleasure. I like the excitement too, but I also like times of just, oh, I just want to know that you're with me and gonna support me and that. And I at early on in the relationship, I didn't appreciate how much I get from those interactions.
I think that's so lovely, honestly, to hear that you have such a successful relationship. And
Uh, I don't take any credit. My wife, I my background would not have predicted a successful relationship, but um, my wife has. I've known her since we were very young. We met when we were probably in elementary school, like 6 years old. So I've known her since that time, and we were friends, kind of. We had different friendship groups in childhood, but there was a day uh, in our mid-teenage years where it suddenly changed, where I suddenly felt that passionate love uh, coming on. So the companionship was beginning and there, but the passion just sort of came on suddenly as the sort of textbook description that it just appears and you're obsessed and all of that, and then that's when we began a more romantic journey.
it's interesting you say that for yours, companionate love kind of formed first, and then in your teenage years, suddenly this obsession began.
Right.
I would like to just clarify with you, Prof. Like, for example, because for our understanding, normally it's passionate comes first before it becomes companionate. But the example that you just provided us was no, companionate can start first and then it leads to passionate love. So it doesn't necessarily need to be one starts before the other, right? It can be whichever plays a role.
Yes, well, I would be careful though. So as I said, my wife and I met each other very young and knew each other. I wouldn't say it was companionate love at that early stage. I mean, we were friends, we hung out occasionally and that sort of stuff, but I wouldn't have called that. I would never have described that phase as love. It
Okay.
was just sort of general friendship, and then the passion came on as we were, and during that phase there was a lot of self-expansion going on in the relationship. We were really doing a deep dive and getting to know each other, uh, and that sort of kicked the passion and got us going. And then the companionate love, I really felt the companionate love develop later over time. So does that clarify?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, I think before we wrap up, we've learned a lot of things today, like how companionate love could potentially begin first before passionate love. We've also talked about the possibilities of how the self-expansion model can come from, doesn't have to come from positive like new experiences. It can come from conflict. But we would just like to ask you, based on all that we have discussed, is there any final advice you would give to couples who want to maintain both passion and stability in their relationships over time?
My general word of advice would be to keep growing as a person and with your partner and you know, even if you're doing different things, keep growing and letting each other know what you're doing so you connect that sense of novelty and excitement with each other. One reason people often divorce is they say they grow in different ways. And I think what they really mean is they're not sharing with each other the ways in which they're growing. They're going off doing different things and not coming together saying, here's what I learned today or got excited about, or so they're not experiencing the excitement together that their partner is, they're not sharing their excitement with their partner.
I think that's quite an important takeaway, that it's not just about your own self-expansion for yourself. It's about how to connect it with your partner and helping your relationship to grow. And with that, we have come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much, Dr. Sheets.
Good morning, Dr. Langeslag. Thank you for taking the time to have this discussion with us, and we're looking to deepen our understanding of the concepts of passionate, companionate love. And we believe that your work focusing on the neuro and cognitive psychology behind romantic love will help to enlighten us. Again, we would like to thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm always excited to talk about my research.
Okay, that's great, because we will be talking a lot about your research. Yeah, we would like to begin with a question on conceptualization. To our understanding, it has not yet been established in literature what love definitively is. There are many different definitions, and scientists also don't really agree on how many variations there are. Sternberg proposes the triangular theory of love consisting of passionate, companionate, factious, and consummate love. So, in your perspective, how do you define love and what are its different variations?
Yeah, so you're right. So I think scientists agree that there are different types of love, but they don't agree on how many and which ones. And the terminology is confusing. So sometimes people use the same word for different types of love, and sometimes people use different words for the same type of love. So it's a big mess. In my research, I used the framework of Helen Fisher. She was an anthropologist who did some work on love. And she said that in humans, we have evolved 3 different types of love. The first one she calls lust, which is just sexual desire. The second one she calls romantic love or attraction. Other people call it infatuation or passionate love. And that's that early stage love that's accompanied by butterflies in the stomach, where people are very nervous and they're worried they say the wrong thing when they talk with their beloved. And so this is often before people get into a relationship with their beloved, or sometimes they don't even ever get into a relationship with their beloved. But that is a very intense form of love that decreases over time, especially when people become involved in a romantic relationship with their beloved. And then the third type of love, according to Helen Fisher, is called attachment or companionate love. And that's a form of love that's a lot calmer, where people just want to hang out with their beloved. It's calming, comforting. There's lots of emotional bonding. And this is a form of love that takes some time to develop. And so it often develops as people become involved in a romantic relationship. And then over time, passionate love decreases and companionate love increases. And research has also shown that it then decreases again over the course of decades. So that's a little bit sad. But yes, so companion love is much calmer, takes more time to develop than passionate love.
Over time, we do see passionate levels decrease and mellow out into what you said, into companionate love. So I guess one question that we would also like to ask you is that what role does companionate love play in relationship satisfaction and long-term maintenance? Do you think that it plays a little bit more of an important role in passionate love, or do you think that they play in tandem with one another?
So that's a great question. I'm not aware of research, or if it's there, I don't know the details. But you're right in your assumption that relationship satisfaction or marital satisfaction, if people are married, is not the same as love feelings. So I think it's important to distinguish the two, because people can be happy in a relationship even when they're not in love with a person. So there are arranged marriages, for example, that can be happy. Companion love tends to increase over time also in arranged marriages. But at the beginning, there's usually not a lot of love feelings just yet, but people can be satisfied in that marriage. Sometimes people are satisfied in marriages when it provides something else than love. So it could provide money or childcare or sex or status. And so those are all reasons why people may be happy in a relationship, even when they're not necessarily in love with their partner. The opposite is also true. People can be very much in love with their partner and still not be happy in a relationship, as in abusive relationships, for example. And so I really like how you are distinguishing between love feelings and relationship satisfaction, because they are two different things. Now, of course, they're not completely independent, right? So they are related to each other. And here I actually don't know if passionate love or companionate love is more related to satisfaction or both. I do think that we know it's normal for passionate love to decrease over time, but I think sometimes that worries people when that happens. And then they think the passion is gone, we should break up or we should get a divorce, which in my mind is not always true, because as we know, passionate love tends to decrease fairly quickly, and that's normal and not necessarily an indication that the relationship is not meant to be. So sorry, that's like a half answer to your question.
I guess to write on a little bit, how would you differentiate between, so you made the distinction between being in love and love feelings. Did I catch the ball correctly?
I think the terminology is messy, right? As you noticed already. So when I say love feelings, I just mean love in general. I'm not really distinguishing between passionate love or companionate love. It could be either being in love, falling in love. I don't know. This is more sort of layman's terms, and people use them differently. Yeah.
So we do see how we may not necessarily need to have love feelings in a relationship in order to be in a stable one. Do you think, though, that it is important to foster levels of love feelings in a relationship? Or do you think we can just have a successful relationship without necessarily having to boost love feelings?
I wish for people to be in a relationship where there are also love feelings and not just satisfaction for other reasons. It is also important, though, to distinguish between relationship stability and relationship satisfaction, because when people are happy in relationships, those relationships tend to be stable. But sometimes, especially marriages, could be stable even if people are not happy, especially when, for example, certain religions discourage or even prevent people from divorcing. And not all stable relationships are necessarily happy. In terms of love feelings, I think it depends on there are cultural differences in what people expect. And then there's individual differences in what people expect, how much people value being in love with their partner versus other things that they're getting out of the relationship. And of course, you can get multiple things, right? You can get monetary support and be in love with the person. It's not either or. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it gives a little bit of clarity. Yeah, there is a distinction that needs to be made between relationship stability and also satisfaction. And I think being able to differentiate those two is important in giving an understanding of passionate love. Yeah, so we would like to pose Kel a question. Why does early stage love feel so intense and almost addictive in that sense? Do you think that passionate love neurologically compares to substance addiction in any meaningful way? And how would it fundamentally shape the one views romantic relationships?
Great question. So this is a new research line in my lab, and there have been some reviews published that talk about the striking similarities between love and drug addiction, and how it seems like dopamine is involved in both, for example. But we don't have any data really that directly compares the two. And so at this point, it's just a hypothesis, a speculation. And I'm currently doing 2 studies in my lab in which I directly compare romantic love with addiction to get some data. So what we're doing is we're recruiting people that are both in love with someone and are addicted to something. And so in one of my studies, they're addicted to vaping, just because that seemed practical, because vaping is legal where I'm at and common. And then we are looking at, do they crave their beloved more, or do they crave a vape more? We show them pictures of their beloved and pictures of people vaping and see whether their brain responds more strongly to one or the other. And we also look at how pleasant and aroused they feel when looking at those pictures. And this study is still in progress. We're still collecting data. But so far, it seems like on every variable that we're measuring, so craving, brain activation, pleasantness, and arousal, the beloved scores higher, which was maybe a little bit surprising, because these participants are just in love with someone, and we didn't exclude anyone on the basis of how long they have been in love. So some of them have been married for years. And so they're not necessarily in that early stage, intense, passionate love anymore. And so, if anything, this study so far suggests that romantic love is even more intense than addiction to vaping, at least on those variables that we measured. Now, to talk about your question more generally, I do think there seems to be some overlap. Like people that are in love tend to be addicted to their beloved, and especially in that early stage, people think about their beloved all the time. They want to be with their beloved as much as possible. But I don't think we have a lot of data right now to say whether it really overlaps with drug addiction or not. Now, from an evolutionary perspective, our goal is to produce offspring, whether you like it or not. And from that perspective, it makes sense that once you have a potential mate, that you really focus all of your attention and resources on them, because they can help you fulfill that evolutionary goal of having children. And so in that sense, I think it makes sense for people to have evolved to feel so addicted to their beloved, especially in the early stages.
So I guess a form of, would you say hyperfixation is expected in a relationship?
Yeah.
Okay, so in your opinion, do you think that this hyperfixation plays a beneficial or detrimental role in relationships?
Great question. In the literature, it's often called obsessive thinking about the beloved. And I've done several studies in which I've shown that people do indeed think about their beloved a lot. Like on average, it's like 65% of the time or something that they're awake, which is a lot. And that means that they're not spending that mental effort on thinking about their homework or their work. And so that is distracting, right? So any attention and memory is often improved when it has to do with the beloved. But if you need to do a different task that has nothing to do with your beloved, maybe then you are less good at that task or slower. In 2 studies, because I started wondering, does it bother people or not? Do they like thinking about their beloved, or are they annoyed by it? Does it distract them too much? And so
is
in
it
2
like
different
intrusive?
Exactly, right. Because obsessive suggests that it's unpleasant and unwanted and intrusive, right? And so in 2 studies, I asked participants that, like, to what extent do you enjoy thinking about your beloved so much, or does it bother you? And they had a slider that they could switch, like move from it, I really enjoy it, to it bothers me. And in one study, most of my participants were in a relationship with their beloved, and they really enjoyed thinking about it. So they said it was distracting. It was objectively distracting when we had them do a task. Yet they said, I really enjoy thinking about my beloved. And then I did another study in which I recruited people that experienced limerence for someone. And limerence is a term that's pretty popular, not so much in the scientific literature, but on the internet nowadays. And it means something like it's often unrequited love. So that people are not in a relationship with this person. It's usually like very long lasting and is really associated with this obsessive thinking. And so I asked that group of participants the same slider, how much do you enjoy thinking about your beloved? And they really did not enjoy it. So they put the slider like all the way to it bothers me. And so it really depends on, it seems to, at least, I haven't done a direct comparison, but it seems so far that whether people enjoy this obsessive thinking about their beloved probably depends on if the other person loves them back, if they are in a relationship with the person, or if it's unanswered love and it becomes more, especially if it's very long lasting, and it becomes very bothersome. So yeah, it can go either way.
Yes, we do see how like different relationships tends to have an obsessive kind of nature to them. There's a healthy engagement where you are, like what you said, you think about the other partner a lot, but it doesn't bother you. But there is also, I would assume that there is also a different relationships whereby you think about your partner too much and you start to be bothered by it. So another question that I was thinking about in regards to this is, how do you differentiate between healthy engagement in a relationship and unhealthy obsession types of passionate love?
That's a great question. So my research doesn't concern that specifically. I think in general, how we distinguish in mental health, we think about depression or anxiety or whatever other mental disorder you could think about, there's always a continuum, right? Some people are not depressed at all, some people are very depressed, but then you have everything in between, right? And so when does it become a problem? And I think in general, the consensus is that it becomes a problem when it's either very harmful for the person themselves or for the environment. Because, for example, a psychopath, it may not harm themselves, but of course it's very harmful for their environment. And so I think you could also apply that logic to love. If you are able to sleep and eat and also have friendships and do your work or your school just fine, and then beyond that, you're like hugely obsessed with your beloved and you spend all the remaining hours with them, I think that's fine, right? I think it becomes a problem if you are spending so much time and energy on your beloved that you're now failing to hang out with friends and you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you're not doing your work or your homework, because that would harm, well, mostly yourself. So that would be the deciding factor for me. Is it harmful to you or others around you or not?
Right, probably when we see negative affect showing up in different areas of our lives, not necessarily in our relationship with the other person, but maybe it could be like what you said, in homework, we don't get it done, or different tasks that we need to, we tend to miss out on it because we're so distracted thinking
Right.
about partners. So I think that's a very interesting finding. This wasn't something that I also thought about, and I think having your research out there to showcase this finding is really important for everybody to know as well. I guess leading into like toxic relationships, one dynamic that we see is that there are different people that we see are so in love with their partners, yet we're not able to change the way that they think about their partners. But one of the research that you have done is that we've seen and discovered how you're able to change just how in love we are with our partners just by employing different cognitive strategies. So could you share with us a little bit more of your findings?
I started this research because we have a big scientific literature on how we can regulate our emotions. We know various strategies that are effective for making yourself more or less angry, more or less scared, more or less happy, more or less sad, for example. And so at some point I started to think, what if we apply that to love feelings? And then I was getting some pushback from reviewers when I was writing grant proposals, and they said, no, you can't do that. Or no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't mess with your love feelings. And I was like, wait, hang on, let's test it. So I did do some research on that. And at first I started by asking people if they think they can change how in love they are. And it turns out people didn't really think they could do that. Some people said, I think other people can do it, but I can't, which is a little sad. And then some people even said, no, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. Love is a natural feeling. You shouldn't mess with it. If, for example, love feelings decline over time in a relationship, then you should just end the relationship. Then it's not meant to be. Given that we have that literature on emotion regulation, we know it's possible. We know it's very adaptive to regulate your emotions properly. And if you think about lots of situations in which people may want to be more in love, such as in long-term relationships, when those love feelings inevitably are going to decline, it may be good for people, may be helpful to increase love feelings. And sometimes it may be helpful for people to decrease love feelings. So what if the other person is not in love with you? Or what if they broke up with you? Or what if it's a forbidden love? What if it's your boss or your students, right? Someone you're not supposed to be in love with. So all sorts of situations in which people may want to decrease how in love they are. So after I established that people don't really feel that they can change how in love they are, I actually had them in the lab do certain strategies to test if it changed how in love they were. And it did. So I had people think negatively about their beloved, about the relationship, or about the future. So for example, think about all those things that bother you about your beloved. What is that stupid sweater they have, or they never do the dishes on time, or whatever. Or the relationship, such as we have different hobbies, or we don't agree on how to spend our money, or negative future scenarios, such as we'll get married, but then we'll probably get a divorce like so many people nowadays. And thinking those things decreases both passionate love and companionate love in the lab.
Oh.
And I was thinking, I did this with people that had recently, or that had, or were still upset about a breakup, even if the breakup was a long time ago. They still needed to be upset about it. And I thought, if I can make them less in love with their ex-partner, they're going to feel better, right? And so this strategy made them less in love with their ex-partner ever so slightly, right? It's not an on or off button, but it made them feel worse, which was not my intention, of course. But I showed that in 2 studies. But I also tested a strategy that I call distraction. So I had them think about things that were not related to their beloved at all. What's your favorite holiday? What's your favorite food? Your favorite movie? Things like that. And that made them feel better, even though it didn't change how in love they were. And so I think people that are heartbroken should use 2 strategies. They first need to think about all the negative things about their ex, and then go distract themselves. And I think in the long run, that may help. I also did studies on increasing love feelings, which could be helpful again, like in long-term relationships. And I showed that thinking positively about your beloved or the relationship or the future increases a companionate love, not passionate love. I did also show that just looking at pictures of your beloved increases both companionate love and passionate love, and it also increased marital satisfaction. That was a sample that was married. So that could be helpful also, for example, in long distance relationships. If you cannot be with your beloved, then just looking at a picture is helpful. And I've also shown that fantasizing about having sex with a long-term partner increases sexual desire and passionate love for that long-term partner. And we also know that sexual desire decreases over time. Sometimes there's a mismatch between the partners in their levels that can cause issues. And so it is possible for people to increase sexual desire as well. So those were the strategies that I've tested in my studies. And so I've shown that you can actually control your love feelings to some degree. It's probably something you need to do over and over again, and it just decreases it ever so slightly. But people can do certain things to become slightly more or slightly less in love with their beloved, depending on what their goal is.
That's a very interesting finding, because I do feel like in breakup scenarios, I think people tend to go into this loop of rumination, or they get stuck in the loop of thinking about their partners, and their passionate love doesn't really die out. So I guess maybe your finding on how to decrease love feelings in a relationship will help people like them. And also perhaps people who are in their lives who want to help them to get through the scenario would benefit from being able to apply your cognitive strategies. So I guess a way for people to decrease love feelings would be to think negatively about the relationship that they had and then move on to distract a bit. And then on the opposite hand, increasing love feelings would be, for example, seeing a picture of your partner if you're not able to physically be around them. And that will help to increase love feelings for your partner, as well as fantasizing sexually about your partner in order to increase sexual desires for them.
And also thinking positively about them or the relationship or the future. Yeah, that also.
Right. So thank you for that, Dr. Langeslag.
You're welcome.
So skewing a little bit towards the territory of companionate love, I would like to ask a question. Neurologically, is there a difference between how we view friends or family versus our romantic partners? And what does that tell us about the key differences between companionate love and passionate love?
That's a great question. And I'm not sure that I know the answer off the top of my head. So there are some fMRI studies, which are neuroimaging studies that show you which brain regions are active when people are looking at certain pictures. They have studied people that are in love, and they often show them pictures of their beloved and then pictures of either friends or acquaintances and strangers. And then typically we're looking at the difference between how the brain responds to the beloved and the friend, because the friend is someone you also know. And actually, you can also feel companionate love, like you said, to friends and to family. But typically people look at the difference, researchers look at the difference rather than the similarities between the two, if that makes sense, because they're more interested in how is a beloved different from a friend that you also know but you're not in love with. You don't feel like, the terminology here is difficult, but you don't feel like romantic love for that friend. It's not a romantic companion love, if you will. So I'm not sure that we have a lot of data on the similarities between the two.
But there's probably more data on the differences between companionate love and passionate love. So if at the top of your head, are you able to give us a few differences between companionate love and passionate love?
It's also difficult. So here's the thing. When you are in love, lots of different things happen. You feel different, obviously. You think different, because we've already talked about obsessive thinking about the beloved and being distracted from other things. You behave differently. And there's also lots of physiological responses going on in your body. Your heart rate may go up, you start to blush, you start to sweat, shaky knees, all sorts of things. And so if you think about it, love is associated with so many different things that there is not like a single brain region or a single neurotransmitter or a single hormone that does all of that. And so it's many different brain regions and even networks, because brain regions don't work by themselves. They work together with other brain regions in networks. So there's all these different networks that cause different effects. So there may be a network that causes you to think about your beloved obsessively. There's another network that causes your heart rate to go up. There's another network that causes you to feel euphoric or maybe jealous or maybe very sad if it's a breakup. And so we have found some different brain activations when people are looking at their beloved and looking at other people they know and strangers. But because we had people just passively look at those pictures. We don't actually know what those brain regions were doing. But brain regions, for example, that are more active when people look at their beloved than a friend or an acquaintance are the caudate, the putamen, the nucleus accumbens, the ventral tegmental area, some parts of the insula or the prefrontal cortex. But then we don't really know what those brain regions or what network they were part of, what sort of symptom of love they are influencing, because we just had people just look at pictures passively. And it's very difficult to study that. So it's hard just to get that data that we would like to get, because it's hard to study the brain in healthy volunteers. And it is hard to think about all the different effects that love has on us. Yeah. That's not really an answer to your question. I'm sorry.
But it's okay. It did pique our interest, and I think it highlighted the importance of developing research into all aspects of psychology. And especially, I think it showcases how impressive it is that you are in this field of neuropsychology, because there is a lot of things that we can discover. And I guess it also should intrigue everybody else that there's so much more to discover about the brain and the body and behavior. There's so many different aspects to even just romantic love and how it plays in the brain. And so I guess today has been a very insightful discussion with you, Dr. Langeslag. And again, we would like to thank you for the time. So I guess to just conclude the entire interview, we'd just like to ask you one final question. Could you give us a little bit of advice? How might couples foster a healthy and satisfying relationship, given the background that you've had?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I can mostly answer for the love feelings and not so much about, I don't necessarily study relationships, but I study like the love feeling within the person. There's all sorts of relationship advice out there on how to talk, how to fight or not. I don't have a lot of evidence-based knowledge about that. But in terms of love feelings, I think it's important for people to realize that it's normal for them to change over time. It is normal, especially for passionate love and sexual desire, to decrease relatively soon after becoming involved in a romantic relationship. That's, in my opinion, not necessarily a bad sign, so I wouldn't panic if that happens. And I think it's important for people to know that they can then do something about that if they wanted to. So there are some strategies that people can use relatively easily, right? They don't have to go to a doctor. They don't have to go to a therapist. They don't have even to tell their beloved that they're doing these things, right? So this is something you can do without anyone's input or knowledge. But you can use these strategies to become slightly less in love with your beloved. And that, I think, can be very helpful just for people to know that they have some control over.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, Dr. Langeslag. I think this has been very insightful. We've taken away a lot of things from your research and your insights from tonight. And we hope that it will be beneficial to everybody that views our video in the future. So again,
Awesome.
On behalf of everybody here, we would like to thank you for your time, Dr. Langeslag. And that is it for our interview.
Thank you very much.
Oh, there's so much content. So what does this all actually mean? Is that, well, firstly, that love isn't fixed. It changes over time. Early on, usually relationships are driven by passionate love. So this is more intense, exciting, and full of chemistry. But over time, love can actually shift into something else, which is companionate love. More on the common side, built on trust, care, and even stability. Both Dr. Sandra Langeslag and Dr. Virgil Sheets agree on this general pattern, but they differ in what it actually means. Dr. Langeslag suggests that the decline in passion is natural and expected. But on the other hand, Dr. Sheets offers a more hopeful perspective, that passion doesn't have to disappear. It can be maintained or even reignited through growth and new experiences in a relationship. This gives us a few key takeaways. Firstly, a drop in passion doesn't mean that the relationship is failing. It might just mean that it's evolving. Secondly, long-term attraction isn't automatic. It takes effort, novelty, and shared growth. And then, thirdly, different types of love aren't competing. So you can have both companionate love and passionate love at the same time, and they actually work together to sustain a relationship over time. In real life, this matters because many people mistake the loss of excitement as a sign to leave, when it could actually be a shift towards something more stable and meaningful. So instead of chasing intensity all the time, it might be more important to focus on building connection while keeping things fresh. So maybe love doesn't fade, it just changes. And the real challenge is learning how to grow with it.